Everyone has doubts at one time or another. I had doubts when I started this podcast. I wondered if anyone would listen. And fortunately, you are. And I really do appreciate that more than you know. The trick with doubt is that you have to push past it. It's only when you do that great things can happen. And that's what today's show is about, doubts. To be more specific, it's the doubts faced by one man as he stood alone against the world. Well, he wasn't quite alone, although I'm sure there were times when it felt that way to him, especially in the middle of the night or those early morning hours when the world is pretty much ripe for haunted thoughts. If doubt were a demon, that's the demon's favorite time to visit. The man I'm talking about is, of course, Charles Darwin, and the doubt that he faced wasn't so much that he thought he might be wrong when it came to presenting his ideas to the world, but that perhaps he shouldn't say, or have said, anything at all.
There is grandeur in this view of life.
Welcome to Evolution Talk with Rick Coast, an introduction to the oldest story ever told.
May 1867 was a strange month, at least as far as the weather went in England. What started out with high temperatures ended with a late spring snowfall. Charles Darwin's afternoon walks around his beloved gravel path known as the Sandwalk was continuously interrupted by the odd weather, so much so that he must have spent quite a few days inside. If nothing else, it would give him a chance to read and to answer the many letters that had been coming in since the publication 8 years before of The Origin of Species. One such letter was from his good friend and supporter, Ernst Haeckel. Haeckel was a German biologist and philosopher who was deeply influenced by Darwin's book. So much so that the two men became good friends, and it caused Haeckel to write in a letter dated May 12th of 1867 that,
"When I see how unfairly and wrongly your work is judged, how even you are personally maligned, then all my respect for the great audience of naturalists vanishes. Your extraordinary humility is seen as a weakness, and your admirable self-criticism is interpreted as a lack of firm conviction. Of course, with good, understanding and thinking men, you have only gained. But unfortunately, these are in the minority. Energetic attacks and merciless blows are everywhere necessary."
and it was true. Darwin did at times feel as if he were under attack. He received a lot of mail, and not all of it was supportive. In fact, some of what he received was concerning. And this was nothing new, and Darwin might have said that he was used to it. He can even be said to have expected it. It was the main reason why he debated with himself over the publication of his book. He needed to be sure when he presented his views, and he needed the evidence to be strong enough to repel most of the attacks. The evidence was there, and it was strong, but it didn't stop the attacks. Whether it came from the clergy, his fellow biologists, or his readers, every negative letter that he received was like a poisoned dart blown his way. No amount of appreciation or accolades could protect him from this. Darwin's health took a hit. Even before being thrust onto the world stage, he dealt with extreme bouts of gastrointestinal discomfort and pain. So much so that in 1849, he temporarily moved his family to Malvern in England to try out a new water treatment cure called hydropathy. Hydropathy was developed by Dr. James Gully, and part of the treatment involved sweating and then being doused with cold towels followed by cold foot baths. And the diet was strict also. Breakfast was biscuits and water, while dinner was often fish. There was also a lot of rest, something which Darwin apparently needed, and as a result, his health did improve. Whether or not it was the rest or Gully's treatment which caused his improvement is a matter of debate, for no sooner was Charles back to work than the symptoms reappeared. He went through extreme bouts of vomiting, nervousness, and debilitating headaches. And on top of all of this, was a constant feeling of fatigue and the occasional dizzy spell. It became so bad that in 1848, he wrote to his good friend Joseph Hooker.
Indeed, all this winter I've been bad enough, with dreadful vomiting every week, and my nervous system began to be affected, so that my hands trembled and head was often swimming. I was not able to do anything 1 day out of 3, and was altogether too dispirited to write to you or to do anything but what I was compelled. I thought I was rapidly going the way of old flesh.
So, what was it? Unfortunately, there's no way to know for sure since we are trying to treat a patient who left this earth over 150 years ago. But we do have his recorded symptoms to go by. And some theories have Darwin contracting Chagas disease during his voyage on the HMS Beagle. There is some credence to this since he had been bitten by a large black bug during the voyage, and the disease is transmitted by bug bites in the tropics. And many of the symptoms associated with Chagas are there in Darwin's notes, including the headaches, the fatigue, and the vomiting. And it can often lead to heart failure, but it takes many years to manifest itself. While a decent theory, it is countered by the fact that Darwin lived until the age of 73, which was a very old age for his time. Also, his symptoms lessened as he got older, not something that would be common to a sufferer of the disease. There is also the fact that some of his symptoms, such as the nervousness and the fatigue, were present even before he set foot upon the Beagle. Life as Charles Darwin wasn't easy at times. Perhaps more appropriate an explanation is that his health was affected by his troubled mind. Darwin's own theory haunted him. It's common knowledge, at least to Darwin scholars and the curious reader, that in his younger days, Charles was on the trajectory to become a country parson. This was at the suggestion of his father when it became painfully obvious to pretty much everyone concerned that his son wasn't cut out for a profession in medicine. The chance at life as a parson had a certain appeal to Charles. For all intents and purposes, he would lead a quiet life. After tending to his parishioners, he could study God's handiwork in nature. Young Charles was a Christian after all, and he was brought up with the knowledge that God could be found in nature if one looked long and if one looked hard enough. And of course, that country parsonage was never to be. Instead of setting foot on the floorboards of a church, he set his feet upon the planks of the HMS Beagle. In time, the notion that God's work explained the variety of species that he saw in his travels left him. There was something at work here, and it might not be God. Nature had no need for divine help. Nature did just fine when it came to molding life into different and elegant forms all on its own. And these were heretical thoughts, and they troubled Charles. He could see where his studies and his research were leading him. They were leading him away from the church and into uncharted and even blasphemous territory. In another letter to Joseph Hooker, Darwin wrote this:
What a book a devil's chaplain might write on the clumsy, wasteful, blundering, low and horridly cruel works of nature. My God, how I long for my stomach's ache to wash my hands of it.
The book he was referring to was the one he was writing, that book being On the Origin of Species. Charles knew that with his ideas out there that they would lead others to question, as he had, the origins of man himself. There was no original sin or an Adam and Eve to commit it. Mankind evolved from less complex forms. Our Adam had fins and left the sea, not a garden, over 300 million years ago. The book's popularity exceeded expectations and fueled debate on both sides of the Atlantic. Charles Darwin, in the eyes of the faithful, had set himself up against the church. His wife Emma was a devout Christian, and this by no means eased his already troubled mind. He didn't want his ideas or the resulting storm to hurt his wife in any way, shape, or form. She stood by his side, and if the hurt was there, she held it well. She was supportive of her husband's ideas until the end. I want to go back for a moment to Darwin's illness. I suspect that a form of social anxiety must have played a large role in his discomfort. Social anxiety disorders can diminish as one grows older, and this seems to have been the case with Darwin. Throughout his life, he suffered bouts of anxiety, and he often went off alone by himself to think. His work afforded him the perfect escape, and he dove into it at every opportunity. Knowing where his work led couldn't have helped his anxiety either. During the time leading up to his book's publication in 1859 and in the years afterwards, Darwin rarely left the house. He often complained of stomach troubles, and he used these as an excuse to avoid travel. And when Emma wasn't nearby, he became anxious or nervous.
Few persons can have lived a more retired life than we have done,
he wrote in 1876.
Besides short visits to the houses of relations, and occasionally to the seaside or elsewhere, we have gone nowhere. During the first part of our residence, we went a little into society, and received a few friends here. But my health almost always suffered from the excitement, violent shivering and vomiting attacks being thus brought on. I have therefore been compelled for many years to give up all dinner parties, and this has been somewhat of a deprivation to me, as such parties always put me into high spirits. From the same cause, I've been able to invite here very few scientific acquaintances.
Aside from his family, whom he loved dearly and completely, he loved his work. Next to Emma, it was the only thing that could calm his nerves.
My chief enjoyment and sole employment throughout life has been scientific work, and the excitement from such work makes me, for the time, forget or drives quite away my daily discomfort. I have therefore nothing to record during the rest of my life, except the publication of my several books.
Over the next couple of episodes, we are going to explore the thoughts that haunted Charles, especially when those thoughts concerned God and what nature revealed about his existence. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Evolution Talk. I'm Rick Coast, and you can find show notes and source material and ways to support the show at evolutiontalk.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope your week is going well, and until next time, please take care of yourself.
Evolution Talk is a Rick Coast production.